Anti-government protesters are back on the streets of Thailand's capital after a day's break. They're expected to voice opposition against a military coup. Talks of a potential coup have been circulating for weeks, although Prime Minister Phrao has rebuffed the rumours. Earlier this week, protesters called on the king to give up his royal fortune, along with the continued demands for the resignation of the Prime Minister. Now, May Wong and Saksit Sayasambat, our correspondents, both standing by at the protest site. Let's go to May 1st. May, we've seen that the venues chosen are quite significant for the protesters. They have a correlation to the messages the protesters are sending. Where are they meeting today?
Every venue is pretty much very calculated. For example, the protesters have met in front of the government house, which is the Prime Minister's.
Anti-government protesters are back on the streets of Thailand's capital after a day's break. They're expected to voice opposition against a military coup. Talks of a potential coup have been circulating for weeks, although Prime Minister Phrao has rebuffed the rumours. Earlier this week, protesters called on the king to give up his royal fortune, along with the continued demands for the resignation of the Prime Minister. Now, May Wong and Saksit Sayasambat, our correspondents, both standing by at the protest site. Let's go to May 1st. May, we've seen that the venues chosen are quite significant for the protesters. They have a correlation to the messages the protesters are sending. Where are they meeting today?
Every venue is pretty much very calculated. For example, the protesters have met in front of the government house, which is the Prime Minister's office, before asking for the Prime Minister to step down. They've also met as well over at the Parliament House, where they've rejected the parliamentarians' proposal on constitutional amendment. And today they're meeting here in Phrao, which is a major transportation hub, also because it is a space that's large enough to accommodate thousands of protesters. They've met here about a month before, and they're now regathering at this place. And today's theme is the fact that they want to ask everyone to resist and to practice against having any coup in this country. Now, I just want to point out to you that obviously you can see here the theme is that they don't want to see any more coup in this country. And you've got this protester putting up a sign, sitting in a make-believe army tank here, obviously illustrating this very key point, and also asking the protesters to speak up against any potential idea of a coup. I also want to show you that the protesters are slowly starting to come around to this particular area. Remember that this place can accommodate thousands, and it's also a major transportation hub. So after office hours, a lot of people are expected to come out and join this particular protest. In fact, the police have already reminded and warned again the protesters they're not allowed to be here, because this is an unlawful assembly. They've issued a warning asking the protest leaders to disperse this entire area. Once again, the protesters are putting a stop in terms of they are ignoring the police's warning to all of this. Remember here that the protesters say they're not letting up. They are going to continue to push for their demands. Demands, of course, again, I need to reiterate the three demands of asking Prime Minister Phrao to quit, changing the constitution, as well as reforming the monarchy. These are the three major demands. They've put it out there, and for months right now, they've continued to push for all these demands to be heard by the government. At this point, they have said that the government is not responding. However, Prime Minister Phrao has already said time and again that he has already come out to show earnesty in trying to solve this problem, and solve this problem through the parliamentary system, to have a dialogue with the people and not to have people come out on the streets like this. I also want to point you to the fact that a lot of the people are already up there on the overhead bridge trying to join in and participate in this particular protest at this particular time. So clearly you can see that things are really starting to perhaps get a little bit more crowded over here. Prime Minister Phrao has warned time and again, not just because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still very much in place here in Thailand as well as in the world, but he has also warned the protesters to stop. Do not cross the line, because we want to solve this through a parliamentary system, through a proper discussion, and not be out on the streets like this. In fact, a couple of months ago, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has been asked many a times whether or not he plans to stage yet another coup. Remember, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha actually staged a coup back in 2014, and that's the reason why they're afraid once again that he will stage yet another coup in order to so-called restore peace and order in this country. And that's the reason why today they're focusing their attention on resisting any coup, and for anyone else here to speak up about it, to say that Thailand does not want to go down that route, because eventually that is not going to be a solution if the military comes out comes out of the barracks.
May, thank you so much for that report. May Wong was telling us about the Thai protesters' appetite for a potential coup. Let's get a different perspective now from our correspondent Saksit Sayasambat. He is also on the ground. Saksit, a protest leader has called to this particular protest a rehearsal to fight against a coup. How serious then is the threat of a coup?
In order to describe the danger of a military coup in Thailand, it's basically the easiest way to describe it. It's Thailand version of a Groundhog Day. That's how prevalent, that's how persistent rumors of a military coup are. And it has historic precedents. There have been at least 13 successful military coups since 1932 and all the way back then. And that's not counting all the unsuccessful military coups that we had. The most recent one was in 2014. And the army chief that has actually launched that coup is the Prime Minister of today, Prayut Chan-o-cha. So that's why there's skepticism whether or not the next military coup is actually around the corner. Now, there's still at the moment the likelihood of a military coup is not very high, even though nobody believes the words of the Prime Minister, of the other peoples of the government, and also of the current army chief that there will be no military coup whatsoever. And the reason for that, the skepticism, as I said, 13 military coups in the past history, that is 13 military coups too many, according to the people here, and they want to break this cycle of elected governments, street protests, military coups again. Now, the reason why we have so many military coups is that the military, the armed forces here in Thailand, still have significant political power. They are not under the control of any civilian governments whatsoever. So that's why it is easy, in theory at least, it is easy for them to launch a military coup. That's why one of the demands by these people is to send the soldiers back where they belong and into the barracks, and not to have the power to launch any military coups whatsoever. They are saying that it needs to end with our generation. It's still very skeptical whether it will actually end with this generation, but at least they could start with this generation to break this cycle of military coups.
Saksit Sayasambat, thank you for that report, together with May Wong there on the streets in Thailand's capital.